Can someone help me, please? Isaiah's voice cut through the chatter of the crowded Chicago mall, but no one stopped. A few heads turned briefly, then just as quickly turned away. Most didn't even glance in his direction. He stood at the base of the escalator, one hand gripping the steel railing, the other clutching a weathered crutch that dug hard into his side. He shifted his weight onto his good leg and tried again to step onto the moving stairs. His prosthetic foot scraped the edge of the escalator step, but the timing was off, and he stumbled back with a frustrated grunt. A teenager nearby snorted. A woman with a stroller steered clear. A security guard looked, then looked away. Isaiah straightened his coat and exhaled slowly through his nose. He didn't need a crowd, just one person, one hand, just a few seconds of help. But in a place this big, people moved like streams around a stone, avoiding, ignoring, pretending not to see. The truth was, they saw him. A young black man, early 30s, trying and failing to board an escalator. To them, maybe he looked like a burden, or maybe they just didn't want to get involved. He adjusted the strap of the messenger bag slung over his shoulder, tried to breathe through the tightness building in his chest. The mall music played on, cheerful and hollow, like a soundtrack to someone else's life. Isaiah tried again. This time he nearly made Ithis' left foot on the first step, crutch sliding behind him, but the moment the escalator jerked upward, the crutch lost its grip. He wobbled, twisted, and a voice called out, "Hang on, I've got you." A hand grabbed his elbow just in time. Warm, steady, certain. He looked over and saw her. A young white woman, maybe in her mid-20s, dressed in a pale gray coat and dark jeans. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes focused. Calm met his with no sign of hesitation. "Step with me," she said. "We've got this." She moved beside him as though it were the most natural thing in the world, wrapping one arm around his back without crowding him. On her count, they stepped together. He felt the shift of balance, the momentary surge of motion, and then he was on the escalator. She stood close enough to stabilize him but gave him space. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't offer pity. They rose slowly through the glass atrium, bathed in winter sunlight. For the first time all morning, Isaiah's jaw unclenched. At the top, she stepped off first, turned back, and reached for his forearm. He accepted it, allowing her to guide him forward with a quiet grace that surprised him. And then, just like that, she let go. Isaiah turned toward her. "Wait, what's your name?" But she was already walking away, disappearing into the flow of shoppers before he could finish the question. He stood there for a long moment, alone at the top of the escalator, crutch steady under his arm, heart still catching up with what had just happened. She hadn't waited for thanks, hadn't asked who he was or why he needed help. She had just seen him, and she had stopped. Isaiah walked slowly toward the nearest bench and sat down, staring at the crowd, wondering if fate ever circled back her, if sometimes the most powerful moments came from people you never saw again. Isaiah didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from or where she went after that morning at the escalator. But for the next several days, her voice played on loop in his head. "We've got this." 3 simple words. Calm, confident, without a trace of judgment. It wasn't just that she helped, it was how she helped. As if she didn't see a man with one leg and a crutch, but just a man, trying to get up. He thought about that moment more often than he cared to admit at red lights, in elevators, in the quiet space between emails. He told himself it was nothing, just a kind stranger. Life went on, but something in him refused to let it go. 2 weeks later, Isaiah sat in the conference room of his company's downtown office building, thumbing through the latest batch of resumes. Cole Dynamics had grown from a startup into a respected player in the AI accessibility field, creating tools to help veterans, seniors, and individuals with disabilities. He'd founded it from scratch, burned years of energy into it. After the accident and the loss of his family, he'd retreated from the public eye, but he still ran things behind the scenes, quietly, precisely, remotely. That day, HR was conducting a round of final interviews for a new administrative assistant, someone to work under operations but with access to senior projects. Isaiah wasn't supposed to sit in, but something compelled him to be there. He told himself it was just due diligence. That was half a lie. Janet, the head of HR, called in the next candidate. Jennifer Rose Henderson? The name didn't ring a bell. Isaiah didn't look up from the resume on his screen until he heard the door open. Then he looked and froze. She walked in wearing a navy blazer and slacks, hair pulled neatly back. No scarf this time, no messy bun, but the eyes she remembered those eyes. She approached the table with a small smile, clutching a thin folder. She didn't recognize him, not even a flicker. Janet gestured to the chair. "Go ahead and have a seat." Jenny sat. Isaiah's heart thumped once, hard. "Tell us about your background," Janet began. "I see here you've worked mostly contract roles?" "Yes, ma'am," Jenny said. Her voice was measured, polite. "I've supported office teams in logistics and inventory. Before that, I took care of my grandfather during his illness, so my resume has some gaps." Isaiah read between the lines. Family caretaker, multiple part-time jobs, no Ivy League degree, no powerful connections. "What interests you about coal dynamics?" Janet asked. Jenny hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Honestly, I didn't know much about the company until I got the interview. But after reading up, I liked what you stand for, helping people who aren't always seen." Isaiah exhaled quietly. There it was again, that same clarity, that same instinct. Janet continued the questions. Isaiah barely heard the answers. He watched Jenny's posture, her tone, her careful balance between honesty and humility. She wasn't flashy. She didn't try to impress. She was just real. When the interview ended, Janet thanked her and walked her to the door. As the door clicked shut, Isaiah finally spoke. "She's the one," he said quietly. Janet blinked. "I thought we had 2 more this afternoon. I want her. She doesn't have senior-level experience. Her references are fine but limited. We have other—" "I don't care about polish," Isaiah said. "I care about presence and heart. Hire her." Janet looked at him carefully. "Did you know her before today?" Isaiah paused. "No," he said. "But she helped me once, when no one else did." That was all he gave her. It was all he needed. The next morning, Jenny received an email from Coal Dynamics. "You've been selected for the position. We look forward to welcoming you aboard." She blinked at the screen, disbelief washing over her. Rachel, her mother, was across the table sipping lukewarm coffee. "They offered you the job?" Rachel asked, eyes wide. Jenny nodded slowly. "I thought I bombed it. I didn't even say anything special." "Sometimes, being honest is special," Rachel said. "You're going to be okay, Jen." Jenny smiled softly, but inside, something stirred. She hadn't even met the CEO. She was told he rarely came into the office. She had no idea the man she helped on an escalator, who'd vanished before she could even ask his name, was the same man now quietly pulling strings to change her life. Back at the office, Isaiah stood by the large window overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered under winter light. People below looked like dots, rushing through their own stories. He'd been carried through some of the darkest chapters of his life by silence and distance. He never expected a stranger's kindness to ripple this far, but something told him maybe this wasn't just a debt he was repaying. Maybe this was the first page of something neither of them had seen coming. Do you believe that a small act, just a glance, a hand extended at the right moment, can change someone's entire life? If Isaiah and Jenny's story stirred something in you, if you've ever witnessed or personally experienced silence, discrimination, or helplessness in a crowd, then drop a 7 in the comments below. Jenny's first day at Coal Dynamics started with a paper badge and a receptionist who offered a warm smile but nothing more. She wasn't expecting fanfare. Honestly, she was just grateful to be in a building where the elevators worked. The bathrooms weren't locked with key codes, and people greeted each other in the hallway without suspicion. Her desk sat at the far end of the 6th floor, tucked just outside the executive winga temporary spot, she was told, until restructuring was complete. The office was clean and minimal, all glass panels and soft LED light. On her desk sat a welcome folder, a laptop, and a note handwritten in bold, slanted script. "You're here because you earned it. I see." She paused. "I see." The initials weren't familiar, at least not yet. She assumed it was someone in HR, or maybe someone on the leadership team she hadn't met. She tucked the card into her coat pocket and got to work. By noon, she'd learned the phone system, reviewed 3 contracts, and memorized the names of 5 departments. She also learned that the CEO, Mr. Isaiah Cole, didn't have an office on the executive floor. According to one staffer, he preferred to work remotely and rarely showed up in person. That suited Jenny just fine. She didn't want anyone thinking she got the job through connections because she hadn't. She needed the work. Rachel's medical bills weren't going anywhere, and their apartment's rent had just gone up again. At 2:17 p.m., her inbox pinged. Subject: Internal brief. Final layout review. Sender: I. Cole at Coley Dynamics. Com. She blinked. I see. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She opened the email. Jennifer, I'd like you to sit in on the layout review meeting today at 3 p.m. Room 603B. You won't need to speak, just listen. Thanks. I see. She reread it twice. A direct email from the CEO on her first day? She considered emailing back to ask if it was a mistake, but stopped herself. Instead, she grabbed her notepad, straightened her blazer, and headed toward the conference room with a practiced calm that barely concealed the swirl of anxiety in her stomach. Room 603B was already half full when she arrived. Designers, product leads, and a few operations managers chatted in low voices. At the head of the table sat a tall man in a dark sweater, back turned to her as he reviewed a blueprint laid across the table. She took a seat near the end, heart steadying. Then the man turned around. Jenny's breath caught. Her grip on the pen faltered. It was him, the man from the escalator, Isaiah. He looked different, now more composed, sharper in posture, but she recognized the face instantly. The same focused eyes, the same quiet strength. She felt her heart stutter and drop, and for a moment, she didn't breathe. He didn't look at her. Not directly. He nodded to the group and began the meeting like nothing was out of place. Jenny sat frozen, her ears hearing words modular interface, beta launch, public demo boot. Her mind scrambled to understand. She had helped this man, 2 weeks ago, in the middle of a mall, and then left without a word. And now, here he was, her boss, her mystery. She forced herself to focus, scribbling notes, pretending her hands weren't shaking. When the meeting ended, Isaiah gathered his papers and looked up. This time, his gaze met hers. He gave her a slow, almost imperceptible nod. Then he left the room without a word. Back at her desk, Jenny sat down hard. A dozen questions raced through her head. Why hadn't he said anything? Did he remember her? Of course he did. But why the silence? A soft knock on her desk pulled her back. A woman with curly dark hair and sharp red glasses leaned over the divider. "You're the new assistant, right?" she asked. "I'm Mel from marketing." Jenny smiled, grateful for the distraction. "Yes, just started today." "Well, welcome. Word of advice. Mr. Cole doesn't talk much, but he sees everything. You'll learn fast here." "I'm already seeing that," Jenny murmured. That evening, as she packed up, she found the note again. "You're here because you earned it." She turned it over, looking at the handwriting, now knowing exactly who wrote it. At 6:23 p.m., her phone buzzed with a calendar invite. Subject: Debrief, 1-on-1. From Isaiah Cole. When? Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Where? East Conference Room 2. She stared at the screen. Her throat tightened. The man she helped. The man who said nothing when he had the chance. Now he wanted a one-on-one. That night, Jenny lay in bed staring at the ceiling while her mother's soft breathing echoed from the other room. All she could think about was how fate had a strange way of folding itself into everyday life. Sometimes the moment you think is over is just the beginning, waiting quietly until you're ready to look back and realize it never left. Jenny arrived 20 minutes early. East Conference Room 2 was quiet, tucked away at the far end of the executive corridor, its frosted glass door closed and the hallway outside still. She stood in front of it for a few seconds before finally gripping the handle and stepping inside. The room was minimalist, furnished with a small oak table, 2 chairs, and a single framed photo on the wall, an aerial shot of the Chicago skyline, caught just after dusk. The city looked like it was glowing from within. She sat down, adjusting her blazer and smoothing her skirt, trying to calm the swirl in her chest. Every logical part of her told her to treat this like a standard employee meeting. And yet, nothing about it felt standard. At exactly 9 a.m., the door opened, and Isaiah Cole walked in. He was dressed the same as the day before: dark sweater, tailored pants, simple watch. But now, with no crowd around him, his presence felt heavier. Not intimidating, but certain. Still, his gait was slightly uneven, and the faint sound of the prosthetic tapping against the floor reminded her he was the man she had once helped, before she ever knew his name. He sat across from her without opening a laptop. For a moment, he said nothing, just looked at her. Not invasive, not cold, just present. Jenny cleared her throat. "Thank you for the invitation." He nodded slowly. "You probably have questions." "A few," she admitted, offering a nervous smile. Isaiah leaned back slightly. "I remembered you right away. The second you walked into the interview room. I'd been hoping I might see you again someday, but I didn't expect it to happen like that." Jenny blinked. "You remembered me?" "How could I not?" he said quietly. "That day at the escalator, you were the only one who stopped." She hesitated. "I didn't even do that much." "That's the thing," he said. "You didn't make it about you. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't even wait for thanks. You just helped, and disappeared." Jenny sat up straighter. "I figured you'd forget me. I mean, I wasn't expecting to find yourself sitting across from the same man weeks later, in a completely different world." Isaiah finished for her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. She chuckled softly. "Exactly." He nodded. "I didn't bring you here to make things awkward. I just wanted to say something I didn't get the chance to say before." There was a pause. "Thank you," he said. Jenny's throat tightened. Something about the way he said it, no embellishment, no dramatics, made it hit harder. It wasn't just gratitude. It was recognition. "You're welcome," she whispered. He folded his hands on the table. "I also want you to know something else. You didn't get this job because of that moment. HR had no idea. I made sure of it." "I believe you," Jenny replied. "I reviewed your file myself," he continued. "I read your work history, your references, the gaps, the side jobs, the time you spent caregiving." Jenny swallowed hard. "Most people see those gaps as red flags. I don't," Isaiah said. "I see a pattern of someone who puts others first. That matters to me. This company, we talk about helping people. But too often, we overlook the ones already doing that kind of work quietly, in real life." She didn't expect the tears that gathered behind her eyes. She blinked them away, nodding. Isaiah shifted slightly. "I didn't want to blur lines, but I also didn't want to pretend we hadn't met. That moment changed me more than I think I realized." Jenny looked at him. "Why?" He looked down, his voice lower now. "Because I'd spent a long time being seen as a burden. After I lost my family, my leg, my life as I knew it, people saw me as either a symbol or a problem. No one just saw me as a man. But that day, you did. You didn't hesitate. You didn't flinch." Jenny leaned forward slightly. "I didn't think it would mean anything." It did," he said. "And it still does." A silence stretched between them, not awkward but full. Finally, Isaiah reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "This is for you." Jenny stared at it. "What is it?" "Not a promotion," he said, a faint smile returning. "Not yet, but it's a discretionary training grant. You mentioned in your HR forms you never got to finish your degree. This is a voucher, covers night classes, online programs, whatever helps you move forward. No strings attached." Jenny stared at the envelope, stunned. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just know someone's rooting for you now." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Isaiah, He held up a hand gently. "You helped a stranger. Let that kindness come back to you." She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Her throat was too full. As she left the conference room, clutching the envelope in her hand, her legs felt light and her chest heavy all at once. That morning, she had walked in expecting a standard debrief. But what she left with wasn't just support, it was proof that sometimes the small, unnoticed acts we offer the world ripple back toward us in ways we never imagined. And in that quiet corner of coal dynamics, Jenny realized she wasn't just part of a company now. She was part of a story still unfolding. The Monday after her meeting with Isaiah, Jenny arrived at work early, heart still carrying the weight of his words and the envelope now tucked safely in her drawer at home. She hadn't told not even Rachel. It felt too personal, too delicate to share. And yet, her steps felt lighter, her shoulders looser. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was building something. But the air inside the office had shifted. It started small, a pause in conversation when she entered the break room. Two junior analysts exchanging glances and smiling a little too politely. Then came the whispering in the copy room, the half-joking tone from a woman on the finance team. "Careful, Jenny. People say the boss likes you." She brushed it off at first. Office gossip was nothing new. People always talked when someone rose a little too quickly or seemed to earn trust too fast. But by midweek, it wasn't just casual noise. Her inbox was flooded with small, cold omissions no longer CC'd on logistics updates she used to get. Project notes delivered late. A few polite, "Oh, we didn't know you needed to be in this." Messages from her supervisor. Mel from marketing, who had greeted her so warmly on day one, now barely looked up when passing by. Jenny wasn't naive. She knew how offices worked, and she'd spent long enough in temporary gigs to recognize the difference between being overlooked and being quietly iced out. By Thursday, the silence was too loud to ignore. That morning, while refilling her coffee, she caught her name in a hushed conversation behind the divider near the kitchen. "Did you hear she had a one-on-one with Isaiah on her first week?" "Yeah. And the grant thing? Word is he's footing her education. Tell me that's not favoritism." "She's sweet, sure. But come on, he never even met my referral." Jenny stepped back into the hallway before they noticed she was listening. Her stomach turned. She returned to her desk and stared blankly at the screen for a long time. She hadn't asked for any of this, and yet somehow, she was being marked, not for her mistakes, but for someone else's perception of her privilege. That afternoon, she waited until the building began to clear. Most of the department had gone home, and only a few lights remained on in the executive wing. She walked quietly down the hall and paused in front of Isaiah's door. It was slightly ajar. He looked up as she knocked once, then stepped inside. "Jenny, do you have a moment?" she asked. Her tone was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of a question she'd been sitting with for days. He nodded. "Of course. Come in." She sat across from him, the same seat where he'd handed her the envelope, the same air of quiet power in the room. But this time, she didn't feel awed. She felt exposed. "There's something going around the office," she began. "People are talking." And Isaiah leaned forward slightly, attentive. "About what?" "About you. About me. The meeting. The grant. People think I'm special, that I got fast-tracked." His eyes darkened. "That's unfortunate and unfair." She looked down. "Maybe, but it's real. I can feel it in the way people talk to me, or don't talk." He was quiet for a moment. "I never intended to put you in that position." "I know," she said quickly. "I don't regret accepting the help, but I also don't want to be a symbol, or a target." He exhaled. "Let me be clear. You didn't receive anything you didn't earn. And the people who whisper, they weren't the ones who showed up when a stranger was struggling. They weren't there." She met his gaze. "That's not something I want to trade on." "You're not," he said, "but you're also not responsible for other people's insecurity." "I just want to work," she said quietly. "To do my job, to grow, without a spotlight." Isaiah nodded slowly. Then, after a beat, he said, "Would it help if I pulled you into a special project? Something visible but earned?" Jenny hesitated. "That might make it worse." "Or," he countered, "it might make it impossible to question your value." She smiled despite herself. "You're good at this." "No," he said. "I've just been where you are. People don't always want to destroy you. Sometimes, they just want to believe you didn't deserve what they didn't get." Jenny stood, steadied herself. "I'm not trying to be anyone's example." "Then just be yourself," he said. "That's already more than enough." As she left his office, she didn't feel resolved, but she felt seen. And sometimes, that was all a person needed to keep moving forward. The next day, her name appeared on an internal memo attached to a new accessibility research initiative, a team of 5, a chance to prove what she was made of. And as whispers faded into the background, replaced by deadlines and ideas, Jenny realized something. The light people feared she'd been handed wasn't a spotlight at all. It was a torch, and she was ready to carry it. By the second week of the new project, Jenny was spending most of her hours in conference room 7C, whiteboards crowded with sticky notes and sketches, her laptop humming beside a tall paper cup of green tea. The accessibility initiative had become her refugee, a space where she was measured not by rumors or assumptions but by ideas, and she had many. The team, 2 developers, 1 UX researcher, and a policy coordinator had started warming up to her. It helped that she worked harder than anyone, stayed later than necessary, and always showed up prepared. Still, the tension from the earlier whispers lingered just beneath the surface, like an echo that refused to die out. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, while finalizing a presentation draft for the next exec review, she noticed a small post-it stuck to her laptop screen when she returned from the printer. It read, "People are watching. Tread carefully." There was no signature, no handwriting she recognized. Just that. Her fingers tightened around the paper. A slow burn began to crawl through her chest. She looked around. The room was empty. The hallway just outside was silent, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lighting and the distant clatter of someone refilling a vending machine. She didn't panic. Not outwardly. She folded the note, slipped it into her pocket, and went back to work. But by evening, the note was still on her mind as she rode the train home, the city outside a blur of lights. Rachel met her at the door with a tired smile and a pot of soup on the stove. "You look like you've had one of those days," her mother said, setting down 2 bowls. "Yeah," Jenny replied, forcing a smile. "Just long." Rachel ladled out generous servings and sat across from her. "You want to talk about it?" Jenny shook her head. "Not yet." That night, long after Rachel had gone to bed, Jenny pulled the note from her coat and stared at it under the kitchen light. It wasn't a threat knot exactly, but it wasn't innocent either. The next morning, she went straight to work, arriving before most of the building had stirred. Isaiah was in early touche, spotted his silhouette through the frosted glass of his office. For a moment, she considered going to him, showing him the note, but something stopped her. Pride, fear of looking paranoid, or maybe the memory of their last conversation still fresh in her mind, how he'd offered her the chance to define her own place here. Instead, she headed to 7C and focused on the presentation. When the team arrived at 9, she acted as if nothing had happened, but someone else had noticed. At noon, Mel from marketing appeared in the doorway. She hadn't spoken much to Jenny since that first week. "Got a minute?" Mel asked, unusually quiet. Jenny nodded, stepping into the hallway. Mel hesitated, then said, "I know about the note." Jenny's pulse ticked up. "You do?" "I didn't see who left it, but I saw someone coming out of this room late last night. After hours. I was working late too, finishing the rollout schedule." "Who?" Jenny asked. Mel glanced over her shoulder. "Craig, from infrastructure." Jenny frowned. "I barely even know him." Mel's mouth tightened. "You don't need to. He knows Isaiah. They've worked together for years. He's loyal, but not always in a good way." A chill passed through Jenny. "Why are you telling me this?" Mel exhaled. "Because people assume things about you, and about him, but they forget you're not just someone who got lucky. You show up, you work, and you don't play politics. That threatens people like Craig." Jenny folded her arms. "Why now?" "Because I used to be where you are," Mel said softly. "Not in the spotlight, but close enough to know how quickly admiration turns to suspicion. I didn't say anything then. I should have." Jenny nodded, grateful. "Thank you." That evening, she wrote an anonymous complaint through the company's internal portal, attaching a photo of the note and logging the time it was found. She didn't name Craig. Not yet. But she set the process in motion. When Monday arrived, Isaiah called for a team lead sync-up, and Jenny was included. She wasn't surprised she'd been pulling more weight than anyone. Still, as she entered the room, she caught sight of Craig standing near the windows, arms crossed, eyes on her. Isaiah noticed too. Throughout the meeting, Jenny spoke with clarity and confidence, laying out her team's progress and projections. She didn't glance at Craig once. When the session ended and everyone filtered out, Isaiah asked her to stay. "I heard about the note," he said without preamble. Jenny stiffened. "I didn't name anyone." "I know. Someone else did." Her eyes widened. Isaiah leaned forward. "You did the right thing. Quiet strength isn't weakness, Jenny. It's how most real change happens. She looked at him. Are you going to handle it? I already have, he said. Craig won't be involved in any internal projects moving forward, and HR is launching a wider audit. Jenny exhaled, her shoulders finally dropping. But more than that, Isaiah added, I wanted to thank you for not letting it derail you. I've known board members who crumble under half that pressure. She smiled. You picked the right person for the job, remember? He returned the smile, softer this time. I did. As she walked out of the room, Jenny didn't feel like she'd won. She felt like she'd endured, like she'd bent under weight and refused to break. And somewhere behind her, she knew Isaiah was watching not as a protector, but as someone who had once fought the same fight, and saw in her the strength to finish it. You still play Chopin? Isaiah's question came so softly across the darkened rooftop that Jenny almost thought she'd imagined it. They were standing side by side at the company's rooftop garden, the Friday night air cool and still. Most of the team had left after the quarterly town hall, but Jenny had lingered, needing space to breathe. Isaiah had found her there 10 minutes later, carrying 2 cups of peppermint tea. Jenny chuckled, the sound dry. Only when no one's around to hear me mess up. He smiled. That's how I started composing. Just me, a busted keyboard, and a stubborn refusal to quit. Jenny turned to face him. I thought you studied jazz. I did, but I lived off classical for years. My mom used to play cassettes of Bill Evans and Rachmaninoff, back when we shared a 1-bedroom in South Bronx. Music was the only thing that made the roaches and sirens feel far away. There was a pause, not awkward, quietly reverent. Jenny looked down into her cup. I used to play to escape too. After my dad died, I'd spend hours at the upright in our garage. Sometimes Rachel would fall asleep just listening. It was the only time the house felt peaceful. Your dad, Isaiah said slowly. He was the army vet, right? She nodded. Lost to lung cancer. Spent most of my senior year watching him fade. Isaiah didn't press. He didn't need to. His presence beside her said everything. The lights from the city stretched out around them, soft amber and silver, like the hum of a memory not quite forgotten. I've been thinking, he said finally, about launching a new outreach branch, something for veterans transitioning back into civilian careers. Job placement, mental health access, the works. Jenny glanced over. You want me to help? I want you to lead it. The words landed like a stone in a still pond. I'm serious, Isaiah added. You've got vision, grit, and a way of connecting dots other people don't even see. I've seen the way you listen, the way people open up to you without even trying. Jenny blinked, stunned. Isaiah, why me? Because I remember that day on the escalator, he said, his voice low but unwavering. You didn't owe me anything. You just saw someone struggling and acted. That kind of instinct? You can't teach it. You can only nurture it. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Not because she didn't have words, she had too many. Too many doubts, too many scars, too many questions about what she deserved and what was too much. But she swallowed all of them. I'll need time, she said softly. You've got it. They stood in silence again. This time, it wasn't heavy. It was full, like something old had finally found a place to rest. The following week, the proposal for the new branch was drafted, submitted, and against all odds fast-tracked by the board. It was the first major initiative tied directly to Jenny's leadership, and the ripple effect was immediate. Department heads began reaching out, volunteers poured in, and partners from citywide nonprofits began requesting meetings. Jenny's days grew longer, her calendar denser, but she never complained. Each task felt purposeful. Every spreadsheet, every call, every note scribbled in the margins of her notebook felt like part of something larger than herself. But not everyone shared her enthusiasm. One afternoon, as she returned from a partner lunch with a local veterans shelter, she passed a break room where 2 senior associates were talking in hushed tones. Sure, she's smart, one man was saying, but let's be real, this whole redemption narrative feels engineered. The other replied with a laugh. Isaiah's always had a thing for rescue projects. Gives him good PR. Jenny paused, her hand on the doorframe, heart pounding. They didn't see her, didn't hear her. They just kept going, carving away at her with words sharper than knives. She stepped back, turned, and walked away. That night, she found herself back at the rooftop garden. Same spot, same skyline. But this time, her hands trembled as she opened her notebook and stared down at a half-written line. Justice doesn't require approval, just courage. Isaiah found her there again. You heard it, didn't you? He said quietly. Jenny didn't answer. She didn't need to. I can talk to them, he offered. Number? She shook her head. They don't matter. He studied her. Then why are you shaking? Her breath hitched. Because, even when you try to do the right thing, some people will always see what they want. Isaiah nodded slowly. Yeah, that's true. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering but unbroken. How do you keep going? He smiled, not with joy but with understanding. Because someone always needs me to. Someone younger, someone watching, someone trying to decide whether to stand or stay silent. Jenny exhaled, steadying herself. Then I'll keep going too. He extended his fist, gently, to justice, quiet but fierce. She bumped it with her own. To justice. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the city lights, the girl who once cried alone in her garage found a new melody rising. Not of escape, but of belonging, of purpose. And this time, she wasn't playing it alone. You didn't tell me she was leading this. The voice came from behind a glass door just down the corridor, clipped and cold. Jenny paused mid-step. Her arms were full of folders for that afternoon's board review. But the words pulled her still. She recognized the voice Bryce Callahan, one of the company's veteran board members, a man who prided himself on tradition, predictability, and an unshakable chain of command. Inside, he wasn't alone. She's efficient, replied another voice, softer, uncertain. And the initiative's getting good press. Press? Bryce scoffed. We're a legacy firm, not a charity parade. First Isaiah hires a one-legged former street musician for CEO, and now this girl. What is she? Mid-30s. No executive background, no MBA. And she's driving budget reallocations? Jenny stepped back before they could see her shadow. Her heart beat heavy but steady. She had heard enough. Later that afternoon, she sat at the head of the conference table, facing a dozen senior stakeholders. Her proposal expanding the Veteran Outreach Division into 4 cities was projected behind her on the screen. The numbers were solid. The data was clear. But the air in the room had shifted. Bryce sat with his arms crossed, lips thin. Next to him, a few of his allies mirrored his stance. Jenny took a breath, standing tall. As we've seen from the pilot program in Denver, when we invest in people, especially those whom society tends to forget, we see long-term returns. Not just in revenue, but in loyalty, resilience, and public trust. We're not just a company. We're a name people look to. A name that means something. A silence followed. Then Bryce cleared his throat and stood. Miss Avery, he said, his tone deliberately formal. This passion project, while noble, threatens to blur the line between business and social work. I move to table this proposal until Q4, pending further review. Isaiah, seated at the other end of the table, leaned forward slowly. Is that a formal motion? He asked. Bryce didn't blink. It is. Then I oppose. Gasps fluttered down the table. Isaiah rose, resting both hands on the polished wood. His gaze was steady, his voice composed. When I lost my leg in that explosion overseas, they called it a tragedy. When I built this company from scratch afterward, they called it luck. But when I hired people like Jenny, people with vision, drive, and the ability to see those invisible to others, they called it reckless. He looked around the room. But reckless was investing in automation before humanity. Reckless was shrinking diversity programs to please quarterly reports. Reckless was assuming the world wouldn't change and that we wouldn't have to change with it. A tense silence followed. Jenny kept her gaze straight ahead, refusing to shrink beneath the weight of Bryce's disdain. Then Isaiah's voice dropped. We're not tabling anything. We're expanding it. Effective immediately, the Outreach Division will receive the green light. Anyone uncomfortable with that can consider this their notice. No one spoke. No one moved. Bryce's face darkened, but he said nothing more. After the meeting, Jenny stepped into the hallway, her legs shaking slightly beneath her. The adrenaline was wearing off. Isaiah joined her a moment later. You okay? He asked. She let out a short breath, half laugh, half exhale. I don't know if I want to cry or go run a marathon. He smiled. You were brilliant. She looked at him. You didn't have to do that. Yes, he said softly. I did. The next morning, Jenny arrived early. She needed space before the day began, before meetings and emails and another round of skeptical glances. She entered the break room, heading for the coffee machine, and froze. Sitting at the table was an elderly man in a navy jacket. His left hand trembled slightly as he stirred sugar into his cup. Next to him was a folder with a familiar logo, same veterans shelter they'd partnered with in Denver. Jenny approached. Are you one of our new hires? She asked, offering a gentle smile. The man looked up, startled. Me? Oh no, ma'am. I just came to see where it all started. My nephew's got PTSD bad. Tried for years to find steady work. Last month, someone from your program got him a job and housing in 1 week. Jenny's throat tightened. First time he called me in 2 years. The man continued. He sounded alive again. Jenny sat beside him, heart full. That means more than you know. The man patted her hand. It means more than you know. Keep doing what you're doing, miss. You're giving people like my nephew a way back. She watched him leave, her heart swelling with a quiet kind of pride that didn't need applause or headlines. That night, Jenny returned to the rooftop garden. The sky was clear, the stars just beginning to appear. She stood at the edge, looking out over the city, replaying the past few weeks in her mind. She thought about her father, how he'd spent his final days telling her stories of honor, sacrifice, and the kind of strength that didn't make the evening news. She thought about Isaiah, his limp, his history, his fire. And she thought about herself, the girl who once played piano in the garage just to feel like she mattered. She mattered now. Behind her, footsteps approached. Isaiah joined her silently, offering a thermos of tea. No speeches tonight? She teased. He smiled. Just one. Jenny arched a brow. Isaiah took a breath. You built something from nothing. Not for yourself, but for others. And in my book, that makes you the real CEO. Jenny's eyes shimmered, but she blinked them dry. Thanks, but I'll let you keep the office. He chuckled. Fair enough. They stood side by side, city lights dancing below, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly where it should be. Do you remember the escalator? Isaiah's voice was soft, nearly drowned out by the rustle of wind brushing across the rooftop garden. Jenny turned slightly, unsure if she'd heard him right. What? He met her eyes. That day in the mall. You helped me. I never got to thank you. Jenny blinked, caught between memory and disbelief. Wait, you were the man on the escalator? Isaiah gave a quiet nod. Just a one-legged guy trying to figure out how to get up a moving staircase without causing a scene. You didn't just help me. You didn't hesitate. You looked at me like I was a human being, not a charity case. Jenny stood still, the night stretching around them like a held breath. All this time he knew. Why didn't you say anything earlier? She finally whispered. Isaiah looked out at the skyline, his voice heavy with reflection. Because I didn't want that moment to define the way you saw me. I wanted to see who you'd become without knowing who I was. A long silence passed between them, the kind that said more than words ever could. Jenny's heart beat harder than it should have. And now? He turned to her fully now. Now I see someone who didn't just lift a man up one step, but someone who's been lifting others ever since. I see someone brave enough to speak truth in rooms built to silence her. Someone who understands that leadership isn't about shouting the loudest but caring the deepest. Jenny exhaled slowly. You always talk like that? Isaiah chuckled. Only when it matters. They shared a soft laugh. But behind the levity was something unspoken, a tether growing tighter. A few weeks later, the company hosted its first formal gala since the expansion of the outreach program. A hotel ballroom buzzed with donors, veterans, community leaders. Speeches were made, awards handed out. Jenny, in a dark navy dress with a soft satin sash, stood near the stage clutching a glass of sparkling cider, nodding graciously as people thanked her for her work. Then she spotted a familiar face across the room, Bryce Callahan, lingering by the exit like a man who no longer knew where he fit. He wore his discomfort like a tight collar. Jenny excused herself and walked toward him. Didn't expect to see you here, she said plainly. Bryce shifted, clearly caught off guard. Just, Came to see if the ship had sunk without my hands on the wheel. Jenny tilted her head. And? He glanced around. It's flying. Jenny gave a small smile. We're just getting started. To her surprise, Bryce offered a nod, small, but sincere. I was wrong about you, he muttered. About this whole direction. I thought it was sentiment dressed up as strategy. But it's working. You've made it work. Jenny met his gaze. We made it work. When people stop seeing differences as liabilities. Bryce didn't respond. But before he left, he offered his hand. She shook it, gripping firmly, without anger or triumph, just resolution. Later that night, Isaiah found her standing at the edge of the ballroom, her heels off, sipping water and watching the crowd from a quiet corner. You were brilliant, he said, coming up beside her. Jenny shrugged. I just spoke from the heart. That's exactly why people listened. They watched the crowd a moment longer. Then Isaiah asked, Can I show you something? Curious, Jenny followed him out to the hotel parking deck. A sleek, black vintage Lincoln Continental sat parked in the far corner, its frame gleaming under the deck lights. You ever ride in one of these? Isaiah asked, opening the door. Jenny raised a brow. Not unless time travel counts. He laughed. It was my grandfather's. He drove it until the day he died. Said it reminded him of when pride and dignity rode in the same lane. She climbed in, the leather worn but lovingly preserved. The scent of old tobacco and mint hung faintly in the air. They drove through the quiet streets of downtown, city lights flickering past like distant memories. Neither said much. It wasn't needed. The silence felt rich, comfortable. Finally, Isaiah pulled into a quiet overlook above the river. He turned off the engine but left the radio on. A gentle blues melody filled the car, slow and full of longing. I've spent most of my life trying to prove I could be more than what people expected, Isaiah said after a while. But the moment I stopped trying to impress the world and started trying to serve it, everything changed. Jenny leaned her head back against the seat. And now? He turned to her. Now I want to live it honestly, with people who aren't afraid of my past, or my limp, or my silence. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who once stood alone at the bottom of an escalator, forgotten by a rushing crowd, now standing at the summit of a company he built not just with strategy but soul. What do you want, Jenny? He asked gently. The question caught her breath, because in that moment, it wasn't about jobs, or titles, or redemption. It was about presence, possibility. I want, she said softly, to keep walking, beside someone who knows the climb. Their hands found each other quietly, not with drama, not with fireworks, just understanding. Months later, a photo would hang in the new outreach office, a black and white candid of Isaiah and Jenny cutting the ribbon together. Below it, a quote in brass letters, Compassion is not weakness, it's the courage to see the unseen. No one needed to know where it all started, or how one simple act in a mall changed 2 lives forever. But those who stood in that office, or benefited from its work, could feel it. In the quiet strength, in the steady hope, in the justice that, for once, didn't have to shout.